Changing to renewable energy entails costs. The creation and loss of jobs, disruption and restructuring of the power grid, and the location of wind and solar farms, to name just a few. Mr. Fatton, how will achieving 100%, or in your case, 80% renewable electricity affect jobs, businesses, and communities? What regulations do we need to make the transition just and fair for all?
Yeah, thank you. So I think...
In 2 minutes? Ooh.
In 2 minutes. Well, good luck. I guess a couple things. One, I think we need to note that there's a cost to inaction. So if we don't do anything, we're actually going to end up paying more. But we need to these issues are complex, right? So we want to have renewable energy workers be paid more, but we also want low costs for our energy costs. So I don't think that there's any simple solution to any of this, and I certainly can't do it in 2 minutes, but I would say that the policies and regulations that I think we need, we need offshore wind to move forward in a very expeditious manner, and we need to do it in a thoughtful manner that doesn't harmfully impact wildlife along our shore, that thinks about how it's going to connect with our existing grid, that thinks about where the component parts are going to be, and that's all about to take place at the BPU as long as the governor signs this bill, and actually, frankly, if he doesn't, because there's the executive order. I think that in terms of the displaced workers, we need to be starting to talk about a just transition policy that really takes care of people who are going to be displaced. When and where that takes place remains to be seen. But rather than just saying, we're going to train you and put you in a new job, there may be some folks who are going to lose their jobs that we should just pay them to retirement. It'll be cheaper and better for everyone if we think about taking care of people who are close to retirement age. If you're 60 years old, are you really going to want to go get retrained to go do solar installations on someone's roof? That's just not realistic. So a just transition policy that thinks about the workers who are going to be displaced. Some people will need an education to go into a new industry. Some people will need job placement assistance. Some people just need to be paid to retirement. And the other piece of just transition is the impact on local economies. So on the way up here, I was listening to NPR, of course, and they were talking about the closure of Oyster Creek, which is a nuclear plant that will shut and should shut. But the local economy, they get like $11 million of their property taxes come from the nuclear plant. So how is that tiny town in South Jersey going to make that up? We need to start thinking now proactively about the other nuclear plants that are scheduled to close in the 30s and 40s, about how those communities will have economic development, what will be the property tax base, because when they do close, it shouldn't just be like we come up with the solution at that point. We should be proactively planning for a just transition for both workers and communities right now.
Mr. Lawton, just and fair regulation.
I just had an image. I was thinking, have you ever seen those TV commercials on pharmaceuticals where it shows the image of like a real happy person like skipping through a field of daisies, and then his low voice saying, side effects include, all these negative things, Mm-hmm. It's almost like this is like medicine we need, but we're also going to have a lot of negative side effects, and a lot of those we just don't know about. So I agree that, we just have to know going in, there'd be a lot of trade-offs. And I would say that, it takes kind of a balance of courage and compassion. Courage to make sure we really push the envelope, because this is a crisis. We need to do this. We need to find the political will. We need to push our policymakers to do something about this. But that has to be balanced by compassion, knowing that this is going to affect people, especially those that are most vulnerable. And I don't think there's any solution, but I think that they have to be mindful about both of those parts of the equation and be able to kind of, on an ongoing basis, work with those. I think part of this, too, I mentioned before, that all prices should reflect all costs. So I think that's something that, that market failure needs to be addressed somehow, because the price of fossil fuels is just artificially low. Also, anything that we do, we have to be really careful about, whether it's a carbon tax or anything we do, to make sure that it's not, in effect, a regressive tax. It needs to be a progressive tax. So anything that we do should not harm the most vulnerable communities already, because in effect, they're already being taxed. They're being taxed with with all the negative externalities from fossil fuels. And I really don't personally, maybe I'm cynical, I don't have faith that those that benefit from the current system, political economic system, will voluntarily give up their positions. So I just think I want to reiterate again that it's important for all citizens and companies that have a triple bottom line philosophy of business to really join together and get much more actively engaged to act as a counterweight. So I think the political will really be a function of the pressure these politicians get. So.
Mr. Rawlings, just and fair regulation.
Right. I think I'm impressed by what some of the other panelists have said about the cost of inaction. This is a balancing act, let's face it. So there's a cost that we really must take into account, the cost to consumers, not only from a fairness and a moral point of view, but also a practical point of view. The pushback could get to the point where we get pushed back really far. We get people so upset about the cost that they elect different people who will bring us backwards. That couldn't happen, right? But the cost of inaction is really impressive, and we got to do much more to research it and to message it to people. The Union of Concerned Scientists just came out with a study in the past year saying that in their middle scenario, not the worst, not the best scenario, that by 2035, that's only 18 years from now, to me that sounds like a pretty short period of time. If you're 17 years old, it sounds like forever, but 18 years is a blink of an eye, I think, in terms of policy. And they said that by 2035, that 21 towns in New Jersey would be uninhabitable. They would flood every 2 weeks, and nobody could live there. What does it cost us to lose 21 towns? That's billions of dollars. It's unimaginable. And the human cost of people having to move away and not being able to afford to do so. That's a tremendous cost. And you could go on like that. Just this week, really scary things came out in science. One was that the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Current, is the great engine of ocean current in the Atlantic Ocean. That is slowing down more than we had predicted because of global warming, and if it stops, there could be incredibly severe costs and consequences. The other one that came out in the past week was that scientists are now saying that the dividing line in the U.S. between the arid western states where you can't grow anything and therefore there's very little population there, and the eastern part that's very fecund and you can grow and there's a lot of population because of that has moved 140 miles to the east. So the very productive east is getting arid and dry like the west, and won't be able to support the food and support the life. What's the cost of that? So we need balance. We need rational and unbiased reporting. Mid-Atlantic SEA, my organization, did a study 3 years ago about the value of solar. And that's talking about those costs if we don't do it primarily. And it was impressive. This is the top research company in the country called Clean Power Research did the study for us. And it concluded that the cost, the value delivered by a kilowatt hour of solar was about 27 cents a kilowatt hour. And it costs us much less than that to produce solar at this point. So cost-wise, I think it is cost-effective. I think we can prove that with real solid research. And that means we should do as much as we can practically. But again, as Dan says, we've got to keep the consumer in mind.
We have to move along. Ms. Garan, just and fair regulation?
Yes, and diffusion of innovation, that's what we're trying to achieve these large and important goals. The fusion of innovation takes a village. As Lyle says, that we need a healthy balance of, technology push and also a policy pull. So that's really important, because without technology and also educated and repurposed workforce, and so that's not going to happen right away, overnight. And we don't have a magic wand to things do happen right away. So that's why we have to deal with every segment of what involves on these stakeholders of the clean energy development. That's really important. One of them is entrepreneurship. I'm dealing with, I'm managing a small center. It's called Clean Energy Innovation Center, and I am dealing with entrepreneurs, young innovators. This state should really support also young clean energy entrepreneurs. That's really important. We brought one company from New York, and so another company, also another New York university, nothing against New York, but so this is really important. So clean technology development is not going to just the part of the grid development. We have we need young entrepreneurs with young technologies, and also obviously the workforce. So that's why a lot to consider. Instead, while we're setting the goals, also realistic goals are important, as Lyle says, that the setting goals are important, but also how to get there. We don't have just one pathway. We have to consider so many pathways, parallel, realistic pathways, but also I'd like to double underline, all decisions should be made by technology and science-based.
Okay, Mr. Walsh, it's getting time, and the kids, and
I'll be super quick.
Okay.
I've been quick. I've been setting my timer and staying on time all the time. I only went over once.
It's hard because what everybody is saying is so important, and it takes more than it. But if you could, just and fair.
I think that justice and fairness have to be at the center of any plan to transition to clean, renewable electricity. Doing so will ensure that we're creating good jobs, a clean environment, healthy communities, and a strong economy. Now, that being said, we need to make sure that low-income communities, communities of color, and immigrant communities are at the table. Right now you're looking at a stage full of white people, right? This is one of the most diverse states in the country, and there's a lot of people of color who are involved in the environmental justice movement, the energy movement, and we need to listen to what they have to say, and we need to give them a platform for their voices. And that's not to diminish the league at all. I think you guys put together a really great panel with awesome people. But I do think we need to be thinking about that and making sure those voices are being heard. We need to set up, and the OFF Act actually is this federal legislation to transition the country off fossil fuels by 2035 and sets a goal of 100% renewables by that time. One of the things in the OFF Act, it focuses on just transition, and it actually creates some of the programs that Dan talked about. It creates a Center for Renewable Energy Job Creation. It provides income supports for workers, relocation assistance, job training programs. We need to make sure that workers in the solar industry are able to freely organize, and that we're paying prevailing wage to people who are taking on government contracts. We need to make sure that we're setting standards for renewable energy development in low-income communities so that we're doing the build-out for renewables in those communities. We're providing technical assistance to low-income communities and the resources that they need and the expertise, and make sure the experts are helping develop renewables in those communities. So that's all I'll say. I had a few other things, but I'll keep it at that.
I have, we can't take questions because we've taken too much time, but I've got one question, and I'm going to give you just a few seconds, each of you, because it's an important question. What actions can high school students take to help implement things like electric buses and solar installations, etc.? Mr. Walsh, what can the high school students do?
I would take steps to get your school board to make a commitment to transitioning the entire educational system to run on 100% renewable energy, and then use that power to then then get the town to do the same thing.
Okay. Mr. Rawlings, can you add to that?
I can. Well, a couple of things. I was impressed by hearing both Richard and Serpil talk about food. I'm a vegetarian, have been since I was 22 years old. That's 40 years ago. And yeah, I do it because of ethics. We know so much more about the intelligence and the emotions and the spiritual life of animals that we never knew before. I encourage students to look that up on the net. I do it because it keeps me healthy, but I also do it because there's an enormous environmental toll that comes from meat-based diets. So I encourage you to learn more about that and consider becoming a vegan or a vegetarian. I'll leave you with that. And the other thing is respect science. Science is not just the art of discovery, and that's how we discovered global warming. It's also the discipline of separating what's true from what's false. And it's the best tool that humanity has ever had for separating truth from falsehood. So consider becoming a scientist. Scientists and engineers are awesome. It's a great job, so consider going into that field. Thank you.
Mr. Lawler.
Great. I don't know what the program's name is, but Sustainable Jersey, Sustainable Jersey, they have a program for schools, I believe. Yep. So if you're not already part of that, I'd encourage you to find out more about that. The other is, I'm going to make a pitch for my field, entrepreneurs, the social entrepreneurs, to help reinvent commerce. So high school students can learn about business, not just one that's based on neoclassical economics, but one that's based on ecological economics. So a whole new field of economics is based on the triple bottom line. So I think we need a tremendous paradigm shift in how we think about commerce and conduct commerce, and commerce in a way that respects the integrity of our Earth systems so they can maintain their regenerative capacity, and also respects the integrity of our social systems so that they can be cohesive and nourishing both at individual level, family level, community level. And there's no reason that business can't be conducted in a way that respects and maintains the integrity of those key systems. So I'd encourage high school students to pursue that path.
Ms. Guerin.
Thank you. Well, I teach critical thinking class, okay? So I always tell my students, this is your future. Take yourselves serious. This is really important, and this is now Generation X, I bet, right? Or maybe different generation. So this is really important. Your decisions, even daily, daily decisions are going to make big impact for your future. Not only your future, but also the generations to follow yourselves. So this is really important. Take yourself serious. Read critically. Think critically, decide critically. And this is really important for you to, survive, and also the generations to come. Also, educate your parents. It's really important. Whatever you learn, please share with your parents. Because the recycling early 90s was achieved, that kids learned and taught their parents. And so this is really important, but read critically. Time is so important. Don't read everything, and especially don't, value fake news, all right? And read the correct, scientific information before you decide, and then go ahead and make your decisions. Thank you.
Mr. Fenton.
All good suggestions. I would piggyback on that and say check your sources. So if you're reading something, you can always look and see what backs that up. To piggyback on what Jim said, and I fully support that, I think go to your school board and ask them, I don't know if we here at Westfield if there's a bus system that's actually run by the school district, but encourage them to convert their bus fleet to electric. Your school buses could be converted the same way that we can convert our transit system. Shameless plug, sign our petition, jerseyrenews.org. We use that to demonstrate political power and support for the policies we're advocating. It'll also get you on our email list, so that you can get information about events and other activities. And I think that that leads you to go into the streets, right? Like, go to a march, show up. On this Sunday, actually, Sunday, April 22nd, is Earth Day. We're going to be in New Brunswick, which is not far, and I think it's a quick train ride. We're going to have a march. You can march in solidarity with us to demand action on climate. We're marching with New Labor, which is immigrant workers, the steel workers, which is an industrial union, and many other allies. So please join us. We'll be at 1 o'clock in New Brunswick. You can find the information on this website, jerseyrenewed.news.org, and if you sign the petition, you'll start getting emails about events like that. And I think it's really important that you do read and think critically and show up at meetings, but also once in a while, it's really good to go into the streets and march.
And after you convince the school to go 100% renewable, I'll build it. Shameless plug.
I really want to thank them. That's great. Nancy, would you like to come up and close? I certainly want to say thank you to all of them. And
Okay. Well, there was one thing I wanted to mention earlier, and I apologize for not doing it, but in addition to Mark LaGrippa, who's one of our town councilmen, Dave Contract is here, also another town councilman, and both he and Mark have been a great help in organizing this. And I just might, you want to hold this up? Sure. This is the work. That's the Workers' Memorial Day poster. And, well, I just want to say thank you for coming, and thank you to the panelists. I can't believe how much more I know now about this subject than I did 2 hours ago. So this is amazing. So thanks very much to everybody.